Presenting our next speaker is a man who needs no introduction. His recent courageous radio and television interviews have sparked a worldwide momentum in favor of the 9/11 truth movement. He is the star of over 100 major motion pictures, including Wall Street, Red Dawn, and Platoon. Currently, you can see him on CBS's 2.5 Men. Ladies and gentlemen, the indestructible Charlie Sheen.
Thank you all. That is so moving. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Good evening.
Thank you.
Everybody's making a big deal about what I did, and I just felt like I was pursuing the truth. That's all. But I want to talk about what we're doing today, more specifically. We are here today to effect a change. We are here today to ask those still sleeping to wake up and join us. We are here today to present a case forged in science at the bedrock and common sense in its foundation. We are here today to fire a warning shot across the bow of mainstream media to remind them of their original responsibility as civil and political watchdogs. We are here today because fear is never a good enough reason to do nothing. We are here today to fuel the deconstruction of the official myth. We are here today to hold our course, to bang our drums, to sharpen our focus.
Yeah!
We are also here today to exercise our right to assemble. Our right to speak freely. And our right to choose. We are here today to begin draining the cesspool of lies and distortion we refuse to drown in any longer. We are here today to unleash a juggernaut of truth. We are also here today to honor the victims and the families of 9/11. We're here today for our children. As well as their children. In our country's great history, every seminal movement, every groundbreaking event, every pioneered moment began with one person. A person with a vision, a person with an undying passion, a person who could not and would not do nothing, a person who risked everything to stand naked in the eye of the storm, in the mouth of the beast, in the crosshairs of oppression. We are blessed to have such a person with us today. A true patriot, a real American, a genuine hero. It is with great honor that I introduce our next speaker. Please join me in welcoming my friend, my comrade, my brother in arms, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Alex Jones.
I want to thank all of you for being here, and Charlie Sheen and everybody. Charlie, I'm not going to keep you up here too long, but what's it like to see all these energized people? I mean, this was your idea, really, originally, to have a Truth Convergence here in Los Angeles. What do you think of this?
This is real, and it's inspiring.
I'm inspired by your speech, I know that. Lastly, what was it like when you took that plunge? Because we talked about it. I mean, Charlie knew what he was doing. He's not a stupid guy, he's smart. What was it like when you took that plunge, when you decided to go public and speak out, when everybody else, in Hollywood seems to know what's going on? They didn't have the will that you had, the courage. How did you do that?
I just got tired of listening to the lies and knew it was time to do something, but that specifically that plunge was like, I guess, jumping out of an airplane, not knowing if I had a parachute.
Well, Charlie Sheen, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank the crowd for being here, and I'm just honored to have you here with us. There's no way to top what you said. It was like Shakespeare.
Oh, please.
No, it was.
Come on. You're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Charlie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much. 9/11 and the neocon agenda. 9/11, the foundational event for the police state we see unfolding not just in North America and Europe, but worldwide. It's so important. 9/11, 2 days of truth, facing the facts, facing the evidence. That's what we're doing here today, and I want to thank all of you for being here. I'll be giving an hour-long speech and taking 30 minutes of questions later in the day. We have Professor Jim Fetzer, just one of the greatest minds on 9/11, coming up after we debut my new film, Terrorstorm. You'll see just here in a few minutes. But I wanted to take just a few moments to talk about courage. It is so wonderful. It energizes my soul at its very core to be here with 1,200 plus like-minded people that are seeking the truth and that have the courage to face the facts and face the evidence when they see it. So I salute you for being here. William Rodriguez is one of the heroes that we have here today. There's a lot of courage. There's a lot of courage in this room right now. But think about William Rodriguez. He showed courage repeatedly at levels that if he was in the military, he should win the Congressional Medal of Honor. On that day, he was the head janitor in one of the towers. He stayed in there. He helped take the firefighters all the way up to where the planes had impacted, to where the main damage had occurred. He single-handedly guided out 15 people himself, and he was there when that building collapsed with those firefighters and was the last civilian, the last non-emergency worker to be pulled from the rubble alive. But frankly, I think the even greater courage that he exhibited was when they took him to the White House, national TV, hundreds of shows. They wanted him to run for Congress. They wanted him to be the new Sergeant Rourke. But he started talking about the bombs going off that day and the explosions before they collapsed and the things that he witnessed. And they told him, just shut up about this and you're going to get millions of dollars. And they were offering him all these deals. And he said, no, I'm not. Then they turned against him. Then they tried to demonize him. And folks, I'm one of the few people that I know who's actually been in the position when you're offered millions of dollars to shut up. And I know it takes some energy to do that, to say no. But this guy had the physical courage. He had the courage to say no to the propaganda. He had the courage to say no to the payoffs. And now he's got the courage to be on the forefront globally with the billionaire philanthropist Jimmy Walter, traveling the world, speaking to members of the Japanese parliament, speaking to prime ministers, former prime ministers in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, doing all of this, going and speaking to the head of the parliament in Venezuela, getting an investigation going down there with Hugo Chavez. This man has put himself in the crosshairs big time because he's a real man, he's got courage, and he doesn't like thugs and bullies. He's a hero. We're here amongst heroes, and again, all of you have courage for just being here. The alternative press that's here has courage. The national press that's here has courage to get this information out, to get in the arena, to put your cards on the table. I mean, it's just so wonderful to know that we've gone from almost 5 years ago with no one believing that 9/11 was an inside job, but having the evidence, to now in major polls, half of the American people in scientific polls believe the government carried out the attacks. But I'll be honest with you, it wasn't courage on the morning of 9/11 that drove me to go on the air and clearly lay out how it was an inside job, to be the first to do it, to predict it 2 months before, saying bin Laden's CIA, he'll take the fall as a patsy to attack the World Trade Centers. I'd seen all the indicators, I had the assets inside the government to know that was coming. It would take mindless courage to see this tyranny coming and to just give up and roll over and let my family, my children, live as slaves, and I'm not going to do that. And there's somebody else in this room that has courage, and he doesn't even want me to talk about how he has courage, but I'm going to do it. I don't care, because we need to single out these heroes. Charlie Sheen, a long time ago, got in contact with me, and he was doing research studying 9/11, one of the most informed people I know on the subject. I know a lot of other great Hollywood people who know all about it too. They're very informed, but they don't have the courage to go public and speak out against it, expose what's happened, because they understand what would happen to them. Believe me, Charlie and I talked about it before he decided to go public, and I didn't push him. I said, he said, well, I want to go public. I said, are you sure? And he knew what would happen. He knew the spins, the things they could do, and just like flipping a light switch on, as soon as Charlie went public, we saw the most ridiculous allegations you could ever imagine, of course, that have all been disproven as manufactured frauds. Think about that courage, knowing that 9/11 is an inside job, a self-inflicted wound, knowing that the official story is a fraud, knowing what the consequences are going to be, and going into that lion's den. That's the equivalent. That's the equivalent of being a World War II airborne ranger and charging up those beaches at Normandy against those machine gun and howitzer nests. And Charlie Sheen did it. He knew what was going to happen. He understood it. But I don't think he understood the huge effect it would have. The 9/11 truth movement had grown. It was growing fast. But when he did that, it was like adding gasoline to a fire. It exploded, and those fires have spread. And Charlie Sheen, what he did with those 2 radio interviews, and then what he did on Jimmy Kimmel, after he'd already been told to shut up, still going on, still having the courage, what he did, I think, is the most important thing he'll probably ever do in his life. And it changed the political landscape. Not just because he was a Hollywood guy or a director. No, because people knew the cost. They knew. People weren't stupid. They said, that's courage. That's somebody who knows we're under threat, and he's got the will to literally sacrifice himself to a great extent to try to save this country. So God bless you, Charlie Sheen. I love him. He's a wonderful person. And I stand with him. I stand with him, and I know you stand with him, and no matter what kind of garbage they spew, because they're trying to demonize a good man who loves this country, who loves every one of us, and loves free humanity. So let's stand with Gene. We have to stand with every single hero. You take Professor Stephen Jones, who's worked at the highest levels, certifying huge physics projects and studies for Los Alamos and other major organizations. One of the tops of his field. published in the most prestigious magazines and scientific peer-reviewed publications. And this guy saw the evidence, he researched it, he said that's impossible. He talked to the engineers, he talked to the underwriters, he talked to the people that designed the building. Then he began to research, he got the samples, and it wasn't just thermite, it was the exact patented type used for cutting pillars. It was thermate. That presentation's coming up. So I salute Professor Stephen Jones, another hero. And now, he's got other universities, other physicists, other geologists, others in archaeometry, researching, reviewing, and his data is getting approved, confirmed. It's conclusive. Again, it is so wonderful. It's the greatest thing in my life next to my children to know the greatest experience, the most fulfilling to my soul, deep down. It's like a cool drink of water in the desert, to be around people like this. This is the best thing in the world. This is the most wonderful thing in the world. And I know it is for you too. And all of you are leaders. All of you are heroes for being here. You've got to get out there. You've got to become the leaders. Not just count on us to be. We're going to win this thing by all of you going out there and waking everyone up in your area. And I know you're doing that. We have the moral authority. We have the facts. We're exposing criminals that carried out 9/11. My team, the guys that work for Slick Eisen and Aaron Dykes and Kevin Smith and Mark McCorder and all the people, Rob Jacobson that are here, all my people that are here, they know what it's like. Believe me, this gone through, the things they faced, being interrogated with me in foreign countries, having people call our office and threaten us, all the things they've been through. Getting past the fear, standing firm, and seeing them getting energized. I don't even have to push them to work 18 hours a day like I do. They want to. They realize that we're at a crisis level, we're at a crossroads, a zenith point. We are literally at a key point in history where all of our efforts have to be put out at 110% to expose government-sponsored terror. Now, the film you're about to see, Terrorstorm, is, I think, one of my better documentaries, probably the best we've made. And it has over in the first because we have to go over all the facts. Then we go to England for the government-sponsored terror there. We cover Madrid. We cover 9/11. We get into a lot of different issues. And I think this film is important to all the other great films, an accompaniment to all the other great 9/11 films that are out there, because it does something that the other films really don't do. We spend a lot of time on the admissions of government-sponsored terror. You're going to see a lot of examples here, and we could have had dozens more, but there's just too many. In a 2-hour film to put it all in there, of where governments carry out terror attacks, or criminal elements of government carry out terror attacks to scare their populations into submission. So this is going to be an amazing 2 days, and I am just honored to be here with you sharing it. We could have had thousands more here, it's just there's no venues big enough unless you get some kind of... We had to turn away, just this week, thousands of people. It was over 300 people calling wanting tickets. Just the first few hours I announced it was sold out, so I'm sad for all of them, but there are some viewing areas out there for the few hundred overflow that did come. And so this is just so wonderful. God bless you all. Hello, I'm Alex Jones, and I'm the organizer and presenter of the conference we've been having for the last day. We're now into the second day, 9/11 and the neocon agenda, facing the facts. It's important to understand that the 9/11 truth movement is mainstream. We are the mainstream. The scholars, the members of Congress, the former German defense minister, number 3 in Blair's cabinet, members of their parliament are clearly saying that there's something wrong with the official story of 9/11. Look at 9/11. We know the official story is a fraud from end to end. Hundreds of discrepancies, hundreds of bald-faced lies. Things that are so comical it's hard to believe, but then we have to realize that most Americans and people globally just haven't looked at the facts. But more and more in the last almost 5 years have begun to look at it, and that's why in Zogby polls, scientifically conducted in the last few months, we have, 48% of the American people believing the U.S. government was involved in the attacks, and 68% believing there's a cover, a new investigation. It was a similar Zogby poll, of course, 2 years ago in 2004. So, Half of the American people, roughly, believe it's an inside job, and the vast majority smell something rotten in the state of Denmark. The evidence, the science, the facts are on our side. And 9/11 is a foundational event for the military-industrial complex that was clearly involved. They are using it to push a police state, the surveillance state, the NSA control grid here in the United States, to federalize our police, to pass the Patriot Act and the reauthorization of the Patriot Act that I challenge you to read, that eviscerates large sections of the Bill of Rights and is totally unconstitutional. And worldwide, countries are using 9/11 and other false flag events that have clearly been staged and other patsy actions, absurd actions, to take freedom worldwide. The United States has gone from the tower on the hill shining light to the world, being the most loved, to now in global polls, respected polling agencies, to being the most hated just in the last 6 years. It's grace. And 9/11 has been the foundation to carry out the policies that have created this sad state of affairs. So we must expose 9/11. As the establishment told us, everything changed on 9/11. It's a new world. Give your rights up. Give up liberty for security. When you give up liberty, you don't get security. You get the T word, tyranny, in all caps. We know that the official story is a fraud, and we are here to expose this and to share ideas and to move forward. We absolutely must do this for the future of our civilization. The United States of America is America and was loved because we've never been perfect, but we were the best. This is where the freedom came from. This is where people stood up against kings and queens. This is where black people stood up against oppression. This is the place where we've seen so many struggles for liberty and decency and controlling our own lives. And 9/11 is an attempt by global criminal networks to scare us into submission to their 21st century tyranny. And we say no. Do Arab nations, do Muslim nations, from Malaysia to Afghanistan, to Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, how do they stand to gain? Qui bono, Latin for who benefits. How do they stand to gain from flying jets into buildings and turning the most powerful country with the most awesome military against them? These people aren't stupid. Who has a motive? Who had written in the PDAC documents, Dick Cheney, that we needed a Pearl Harbor catalyzing event? Brzezinski in the Grand Chessboard in '97 said we need a helpful Pearl Harbor event. This is what they said. So we have all this planning, all of this going on. Who gets trillions of dollars of oil? 4+ trillion, and that was at oil price back in 2001. It's almost double that now. 4 trillion in Afghanistan. 4 to 6 trillion in Iraq of discovered reserves there, right under the ground. Hundreds of billions in weapon sales. The war has now cost almost $400 billion. They say we'll be there another decade. That's in the official Pentagon plans. So that'll be well over $1 trillion. If 3.5 years is almost $400 billion, we're talking about almost $1 trillion in weapon sales and Halliburton contracts. This is big money. This is control. But not only that, the PNAC boys told us we'll also use Iraq to build these permanent bases, and that they want civil war there as a pretext to stay and build the bases as a base of operations to then link up, take over Iran and Syria. Then they have Afghanistan. Now they're on China's doorstep. This is about war with China in the final equation. This is about World War III. And there's no reason this needs to happen. We must expose 9/11. It's meant to terrorize the American and the people of the West into this clash of civilizations that they're engineering. I'd like to introduce our panel now. There's Lieutenant Colonel Bob Bowman. He is the first director of what is known as the Star Wars program, or the Strategic Defense Initiative under Ford and Carter when it was secret. And Lieutenant Colonel Bob Bowman, of course, was the former Director of Advanced Space Programs Development for the U.S. Air Force. and the former United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel with 101 combat missions over Vietnam. And he holds, again, a PhD in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from the California Institute of Technology, and many, many other letters.
Well, if the government has nothing to hide, why is it hiding everything? Why is it confiscated and hidden or destroyed all the evidence? Why is it hiding the videotape of whatever hit the Pentagon? Why is it hiding the audio tapes of the FAA controllers and NORAD? Why is it shipping off to China immediately all the forensic evidence except a little bit, thank God, that Professor Jones was able to get a hold of? The truth about 9/11 is that we don't know the truth about 9/11, and we should. I deserve the truth. You deserve the truth. The families of those killed on 9/11 deserve the truth. The American people deserve the truth, and they're not getting it. One tiny example, why those planes not intercepted? I'm an old interceptor pilot. I know the drill. I've done it. I know how long it takes. I know the rules. And critics of the government story on 9/11 have said, well, they knew about this and they did nothing. That's not true. If our government had done nothing that day and let normal procedures be followed, those planes, whatever they were, would have been intercepted, the Twin Towers would still be standing, and thousands of dead Americans would still be alive. Now, some in defense of the government say, well, I guess there was a little bit of incompetence on that day. If this massive failure was incompetence, why was there nobody fired, nobody court-martialed, nobody demoted, nobody punished? The truth of the matter is that those primarily responsible in a position where they could have made the difference were either promoted or given the Medal of Freedom, for God's sakes. Alex talked about the connection between 9/11 and Iraq. That's my forte, because as a career military officer, as a combat veteran, I am really incensed that our government is ordering our sons and daughters around the world to kill Arabs for the oil companies. And 9/11 was their excuse. 9/11 was their new Pearl Harbor. People tell me, oh, we had to do something, 9/11, and I say, yeah, but why Iraq? Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were bitter enemies. If we really thought those 19 hijackers were responsible, why didn't we attack Saudi Arabia? The truth about the Iraq War is that it has nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction or democracy or freedom or getting rid of Saddam Hussein or protecting America or our allies. It has to do with money, it has to do with oil, and it has to do with raw imperial power. I'm the next congressman from Florida's 15th district. And when I get there, I am taking the 9/11 movement mainstream. It's time the 9/11 truth movement moved out of rented hotels and into the halls of Congress. I may not be there yet, but I have already lined up co-sponsors for legislation to initiate a truly independent investigation of 9/11. And also articles of impeachment for Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Rice. As a pilot who flew 101 combat missions in Vietnam, I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that includes a renegade president. It's time the whole mafia were removed from office and indicted for treason. God bless America, and God grant us regime change in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
I'm not going to be able to introduce this guy properly, so later I hope he tells us a little bit more about it. But he's edited many books, published books on government criminal activity, on the JFK assassination. Professor James Fetzer founded 9/11 Scholars for Truth, a group with over 300 faculty, students, and scholars who question the official scientific account of the September 11, 2001 attacks. The group was founded December 15, 2005, and has sent shockwaves around the world. It's been a magnet, a think tank, to bring the best and brightest minds in many different fields together to expose 9/11 and other government-sponsored terror events. Professor Jim Fetzer.
We've not only been able to falsify, refute the alleged physics of the situation, but essentially everything the government has told us about 9/11 is false. Let me offer an illustration. I've always been very suspicious of this scenario in which a ragtag group of terrorists with box cutters could overtake 4 commercial airliners. In my opinion, any group of American passengers confronted with a couple of terrorists with box cutters would have beaten them to death with their luggage. So let me offer you my top 10 reasons for thinking they are fake. And where's Paul Schaefer when you need him? Number 10 top reason for thinking the hijackers are, their names do not appear on any passenger manifest. That's not easy to arrange, my friends. If you know of any other case, I'd be interested in hearing it. Number 9, none of them were subject to any autopsy. Would have been interesting, powerful evidence if, in fact, we had some bodies here to offer some proof, but there is none. Number 8, top 10 reason for thinking these hijackers are fake. 5 to 7 at least have turned up alive and well and living in the Middle East. They've even been interviewed by the BBC and The Guardian in the UK. Now, I dare say that if they were actually killed in the impact of these airliners, then it's even more difficult to imagine how they could have arranged those interviews. Reason number 7, the FBI, nevertheless, has not revised its list. This is quite surprising. They have to be aware. David Ray Griffin's second book on 9/11, the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions, makes this point as his number one item. They have to know, yet they have not revised their list. As an aside, I expect we're going to see some backtracking and equivocating now, and they're going to be saying, well, maybe they aren't really sure about all the names on their list. But listen to this. Reason number 6. A special agent of the FBI by the name of Flagg, F-L-A-G-G, has explained that the FBI knew almost immediately the names of all 19 hijackers because they discovered a piece of luggage left by Mohammed Atta when he had driven up to Portland and then turned around and rushed down to Logan just in time to participate in the hijacking of a plane from that airport. According to Flagg, this piece of luggage Atta left behind included not only a terrorist manual, but a very convenient list of the 19 hijackers. And I say, well, that's really quite stunning, considering 5, 6, or 7 of these guys have turned up alive and well. How can you explain that? Reason number 5, and that, incidentally, gives new meaning to the word false flag. My top 10, number 5 reason for thinking these hijackers were fake. They could not have flown the planes. Neil Sagatavan, among others, who's a pilot and aeronautical engineer, has studied their training background, and it's simply preposterous to presume these guys who could barely get a Cessna off the ground could have piloted a commercial airliner and brought it to its target. It's preposterous. Top 10 reason number 4. Those cell phone calls that we've heard so much about could not have been made at the altitudes and speeds these planes were flying. A.K. Dudney, a professor of computer science in Ontario, has taken cell phones of different makes and models on different flights around the country and discovered at altitudes above 2,000 feet and speeds above 230 miles an hour that cell phone connections become fewer and farther between. They would have been impossible. And that, of course, would include the one you've all heard about, alleged passenger Mark Bingham, where he calls his mother and says, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham."
You believe me, don't you?
Top 10 reason number 3. During the trial of the alleged 20th hijacker, Zacarias Moussaoui, a tape recording was played, allegedly from Flight 93, which included the passengers discussing how they were going to attempt to break down the door using a drink cart. An astute student of the case wrote me to point out that this was ostensibly a cockpit voice recording, and that cockpit voice recorders do not record voices in the passenger compartment. Top 10 reason 2 why these hijackers appear to be the last words attributed on that tape to the hijackers who were facing imminent death was Allah Akbar, which is Arabic for God is great, God is great. According to a Muslim member of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, the last words that a devout follower of Islam should say when confronting imminent death is not those words, but rather, in Arabic, there is but one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. I therefore suggest that the writers assigned to this script simply didn't know enough to get it right. Number 1, top 10 reason number 1 for believing these hijackers were fake. Zacarias Moussaoui, this April, was subjected to a trial to determine whether he should be punished by life imprisonment or even death for not coming forward to reveal the plot, which the government maintained, had he done, would have enabled the government to have intervened and saved lives. I make 3 observations. A year before, April last, Zacarias Moussaoui confessed to a different plot. He had acknowledged that he had been involved in a plot to fly a plane into the White House in order to extort release of a terrorist, a sheik who had been imprisoned for terrorist activities in 1993. He denied he had anything to do with 9/11. That is the crime to which he confessed. A year later, the federal government has played a shell game, and now they're insinuating and implying he had something to do with 9/11. As my good friend Webster Tarpley has observed, this man had no obligation to come forward and to confess his involvement in a plot, even if he had been involved in 9/11. We still have something here known as the Fifth Amendment. He had no obligation to incriminate himself. Third, and most tellingly, and this must have been incredibly embarrassing to the government, an FBI agent testified he'd been following Moussaoui. He'd been observing him taking this flight training. He had suspected that he might be involved in a terrorist plot, even to fly planes into the trade towers, though he suggested later that was merely a lucky guess. He testified under oath that he had told his supporters, his superiors, about his suspicions, not once, not twice, 70 times. And I say to you, 5 or 6 might be excused as ordinary incompetence. 20 or 25 may be criminal neglect. 70 times has to have been a matter of direct policy, deliberate policy. They were keeping these guys in reserve so they could use them as their cover story when the government itself perpetrated these dastardly terrorist acts.
All right. Webster Griffin Tarpley has been writing for over 25 years on government and state-sponsored and criminal network terrorism. He is an expert in uncovering how governments and how private corporations carry out false terror attacks, murders, other criminal activities, and then blame it on their enemies. He is the iconoclastic Webster Tarpley, an activist, historian, best known for his George Bush, the Unauthorized Biography, which was an underground bestseller and classic. And we are honored to have him here with us today. Against Oligarchy, a collection of Tarpley's essays and speeches on the internet, and has also been a huge success at waking people up. He is the author of 9/11 Synthetic Terror, Made in the USA. Yeah. Okay. Well, if the government or elements of it were involved, it'd be so big it'd come out. People'd speak out. We'd find out. Isn't the answer we have?
If you go and look at something like the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb, there were tens of thousands involved, and the secret never came out. So I think this is generally a red herring. Let me just say how I got into this. I was in Berlin on September 11th, so it all hit me late in the afternoon after coming out of a conference that I was attending. When you see something like this, you're confronted by an act of spectacular war provocation, obviously involving hundreds and hundreds of people, hundreds of millions of dollars. And you can figure out, for me it was about 30 seconds in Berlin to figure it out, who could do that? Who has the physical, technical capability? If you know the contents of the world in terms of secret intelligence agencies, you know it's the US, the British, the French, the Russians, the Mossad. And of course, other countries in their own soil. But given where it was and when it was, given the suppression of air defense for 1 hour and 45 minutes and even more, it can only be a force inside the US command, with some help, as we turn out later to find, from the British, from MI5, MI6. Now, the goal of this is obviously to bring about the war of civilizations, the Samuel Huntington thesis, the Wolfowitz doctrine about never letting any other power in the world get even regional predominance, and then the PNAC documents which publicize this entire thing. So you're dealing with a coup d'etat. 9/11 is a coup d'etat, one part of the government attacking another part of the government. I would say, if you want to identify who did it, we can talk about a rogue network, an invisible government, a secret team, the deep state, the fifth column, many words that have been coined to describe what everybody is vaguely aware of, that if you go back to the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Kennedy assassination, the Gulf of Tonkin, the Vietnam War, and in particular, the Iran-Contra drug running and gun running, this is necessarily the network that has the physical and technical capabilities to carry this out. Now, I came to this from having studied NATO spheres of influence terrorism in Central Europe, the Moro assassination, the Red Brigades in Italy, the Baader-Meinhof group in Germany, and also the Iran-Contra questions. And when you look at it from this point of view, there's a prima facie conclusive case that the only agency that's capable of doing this is one cutting across the Department of Defense, the CIA, the NSA, the National Security Council, and so forth. Now, that hypothesis has to be then tested by a rigorous research, which I tried to do for my book, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, Made in USA, and I think the finding is now conclusive. If you look at the absurdities of this story, we're given 19 patsies, a lot of them basket cases, a lot of them very low-grade subjects, a lot of people who would have difficulty even getting through a normal day without some kind of support, right? Some of them couldn't get a driver's license probably in any state except possibly New Jersey. So they're very low-grade subjects, and we're told that these 19 patsies were able to carry out these spectacular feats. The fact that they lived on military bases and were trained on military bases and were, I believe, reporting to terrorist controllers and case officers inside something like the Able Danger organization. You've also got the fact then of 1 hour and 45 minutes with no air defense. You've got the fact that the buildings had to come down through controlled demolition. It's a physical anomaly, as Professor Jones has said. It's clear also that there's no Boeing aircraft at the Pentagon, but rather something like a cruise missile. And finally, in Shanksville, the airplane has obviously been destroyed in midair, probably shot down, probably blown up in this way. There's also another level. This myth is absurd. It is intellectually and morally degrading to believe it. It is a myth of fascist Hitlerian proportions. The Nazis talked about the myth of the 20th century as nationalism and chauvinism. Terrorism is now the myth of the 21st century. We're told that the purpose of the United States for the entire foreseeable future is the war on terror and nothing but. That's no future for the United States or for the world. It is a racist and warmongering myth. And if you believe it, you will share in the degradation of the ruling elite of this country, who have, I think, they're headed for a tremendous crash and dead end. The most important thing is that the 9/11 myth is, of course, the premise and the root of the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war and the coming attack on Iran. I left Washington a couple of days ago. Washington is gripped by a war psychosis. Preparations are virtually complete for the nuclear attack on Iran based on absolutely nothing. We've got prestigious figures from the Clinton administration, Secretary Perry, calling for a preemptive attack on North Korea. And perhaps the scariest of all, the Lieber and Press article in Foreign Affairs in the March-April issue, talking about a first strike against the thermonuclear forces of Russia and or China. 3 paths leading to World War III, the incineration of this planet, all of them presided over by a group I can only call the neocon fascist madmen, the Strangeloves, the people who have got to be driven out of public life. Now, the basis of their power is the 9/11 myth. We are now in a race against Cheney and Bush have run up against a brick wall in the United Nations. They need an outside event. The Cheney Doctrine calls for the nuclear attack on Iran in the wake of a new fake 9/11 or new fake Gulf of Tonkin. That is now what is being prepared. The task of our movement, as I see it, is to educate the U.S. and world populations to the following point. If weapons of mass destruction go off anywhere in the world, please don't think Bin Laden, the cave, Afghanistan, Pashtunistan, or some other myth-drenched region. Please don't think it's Iran or Hezbollah. They're not that. You've got to look to Cheney's office, Cheney's backers, Cheney's controllers, the neocon war party, and above all, the invisible government, the people with the technical ability to bring these things about. So I think this is our task, to educate the people to the point where the weapon of terrorism, which the oligarchy, the invisible government proposed to use to organize this society, we must take that weapon and break it before their faces, deprive them of the ability to stampede and manipulate hundreds of millions of people using these cynically planned terrorist events of the synthetic terrorist type. And I think that's what our movement has to do. Thank you.
We have Professor Stephen E. Jones. Is Professor... Stephen Earl Jones is a professor of physics at Brigham Young University who conducts research into nuclear fusion and solar energy. Although the term cold fusion was coined by Jones in 1980, his experimental work was significantly different than more controversial cold fusion experiments by Pons and Fleischmann. Recently, Jones has also investigated, and he investigated that for the federal government, by the way, the hypothesis that the World Trade Center Twin Towers and WTC-7 all collapsed nearly symmetrically on September 11, 2001, were brought down by pre-positioned explosives. In '73, Jones earned his bachelor's degree in physics with honors from Brigham Young University and his PhD in physics from Vanderbilt University in '78. Jones conducted his PhD research at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center from '74 to '77 and postdoctoral research at Cornell University and Los Alamos Physics Facility. And he has written a scholarly paper that has, of course, been posted on the Brigham Young University website. And right now he is working with several other universities and other physicists and scientists, geologists, studying some of the samples they were able to from the North and South Tower. And it shows conclusively thermite was used to cut the pillars. Not just thermite, the patented type used for demolition, thermate. Professor Jones, if you can please just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you woke up to 9/11, and then go through the incredible new discoveries and developments that you have been working on. Thank you.
Well, over the past several years, I received several nudges to investigate what really happened on 9/11. And I must admit, it took me a while to warm up to the idea, but finally, I did. And the first time I saw Building 7 come down straight and fast, I realized this is very curious. I hadn't seen it until just about, it's been about a year and a half now ago. And as soon as I saw it, in a sense, I was hooked. I figured, as a scientist, I can't just ignore this data. I could see that building come straight down. I'd seen demolitions before, controlled demolitions. They look just like that. A kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed. Yeah, it's got these steel columns in the center and around the perimeter, and yet it just falls straight down. So, unfortunately, I got onto a good website, friend Jim Hoffman's site, their WTC7.net. And the nice thing that, and I have many friends now, in this area. One nice thing that they did on that site is to provide references, and I like that because then I can check, Now I check for myself, so I go to this reference. It talks about sulfidation of steel. Gosh, that's curious. How did this sulfur get in this steel? It's high temperature corrosion of the steel with sulfur. Man, that's really strange. I read that. I went to the source. I read it, and pretty learning about molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet, and yet it comes down, and then it's got this molten metal underneath. And where'd that come from? I mean, I hear people say, well, that would be from the metal of the planes. Well, that might work for the towers, possibly, but it sure doesn't work for Building 7. It was 300 plus feet away from the North Tower, and no plane hit it. So where does this molten metal come from? So pretty quick then, as I studied this, I wrote up a paper, which many of you have seen. If you haven't, I hope you would. Just Google on Steve Jones, World Trade Center. It'll pull it right up. And I studied various aspects. And the molten metal is my first topic. It's the one that really caught my interest, and the data is just coming together. Now, I have a sample of this molten metal. Previously, it's molten metal here. Just a tiny sample. This is really all we need. I brought along with me at the last minute. I thought, well, I'll throw that in. And by analyzing this, it is not molten aluminum from the plane, okay. Indeed, it contains a great deal of iron, which is the product of the thermite reaction. Now, thermite can be purchased on eBay, and many people, I show it in my class, physics, and I'll be showing it this fall in my physical science class. It's commonly shown. It's a very brilliant reaction. You get this white flare, this white dust, which is aluminum oxide coming off, and then this yellow hot molten metal, just white yellow hot, flowing out of this reaction. Now this thermite is so hot, this molten iron, especially when you mix sulfur in. Now it's called thermate. So sulfur added to this molten iron, it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. And we also see this molten, yellow hot molten metal with white wispy ash pouring out of the South Tower just minutes before its collapse. And I've shown this video. And it's just amazing. Photographs of that. It's in the NIST report. They say, well, probably molten aluminum from the aircraft. No, sorry, it's not. We did experiments at BYU with molten aluminum. We heated the steel pan up to yellow hot temperature, pour that aluminum out. It looks like silvery aluminum, even though the pan is yellow hot. And there's reasons for that. Aluminum just doesn't emit much of this incandescent glow. It's very low emissivity. Sorry for the technical details, but the point, experiments show it still looks silvery, and yet out of the World Trade Center, it's all hot, okay? So as we looked at this, and the evidence is just piling up, this is, it has the characteristics, not of molten aluminum, and not of molten, it's not just structural steel that somehow melted, no. It's very little chromium. But it does sulfur and manganese and some other elements that are characteristic, you see. It's like a fingerprint that the criminal left behind. This carries with it evidence. How was this done? What was used? And I should explain real quickly. This particular, people ask me all the time, where'd you get this? Well, women in Northeast who was involved, went to one of these memorials that was being put together, the 9/11 memorial, structural steel from the World Trade Center. She noticed on it dirt clinging to the structure. This is several years ago, before I joined the game here, so to speak. And she said, well, that is going to be subject to rain. It's just going to be a mess. And so she just cleaned it up. She just cleaned some of that dirt off. It's in the Northeast, and this memorial's going up. She cleaned it up, put it in a bucket. She saved it. Then as soon as my paper appeared, she read my paper. This last November would have been. As she read my paper, I'm calling for an investigation, particularly of this molten metal, and see what's going on. It'll tell us what happened, give us insight into what really happened on 9/11. Well, she immediately sent me this sample. Quite a large sample, actually, but not all of it. She said, I'm keeping some back. And I said, that's good, because we may want to, have another lab check it. Don't send it here. You'll send it to another lab directly at some point, probably. Anyway, in there, I don't think she even noticed, there's this molten metal chunks. See? In with this, just from this memorial to 9/11 and to the families, who I deeply sympathize with those families. So we checked this metal, and that's how we got it. And another sample like it, same characteristics, high in iron, manganese, fluorine. I mean, where do these chemicals come from? And then as I studied about thermite, arson, I'll wrap it up here.
No, I was checking to see if my mic was live, Professor. It's key to state you got it from another site separately.
Yes, we have two separate sites. This other one. Okay, so, but similar process, acquiring this, just private people, and so anyway, the point is, as we analyze this, I get into this question of thermite arson. It turns out that arsonists, these are the bad guys, right, start using thermite. I mean, you can buy this stuff on eBay. It's not like it's a secret or something, and I don't recommend you play with this stuff, by the way. It's very dangerous. Okay, molten yellow hot iron pours out of this. It's highly dangerous, but it will cut through iron. So arsonists use it, and now there's a whole field then of investigation. Investigators know how to look at this metal, and so but these things are coming together. This chain of evidence. This is not the only thing. This is just one of the things. The collapse of Building 7 is another. Studied that. A great paper by Professor Cutler is in the Journal of 9/11 Studies.com. You can look that up. His paper on the collapse of Building 7. And so anyway, this chain of events leads me to reluctantly conclude that indeed there does seem to be insider, in other words, not just the hijacked planes, but also others involved setting these thermite cutter charges in the World Trade Center to bring them down. And this again leads to the conclusion that our Constitution, which is our heritage as Americans, I love my country, I love the Constitution and the people in America. I'm afraid that our Constitution is literally hanging by a thread at this stage. And
Professor, can you specifically, because you've talked about this on my radio show, you've published it, you looked at the thermite, you tested, it's not just thermite, it's the patented thermate.
with the sulfur.
Sulfur on top of it as an accelerant. Expand on that. This is even patented. This is actually used to cut large pillars.
It's true that when you add sulfur to the thermite, it now cuts very quickly through steel. And again, do you remember earlier I spoke of this paper I read? These metallurgists in Massachusetts had looked at World Trade Center 7 steel and some from the towers also. Strange, they said, that high temperature sulfidation. Where does this sulfur come? Where do these high temperatures come from? Well, the answer, you see, we're getting at, it's totally consistent with this thermate.
Specifically, you looked at the science, and only thermite could create these molten pools that a month later were still at many thousands of degrees hotter than jet fuel burns down in the basement collapse area. And then you have the hypothesis thermite could do that. It's a prime suspect. You get samples. It's not just thermite. It's the demolition special design thermate.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's accurate. I mean, consistent with these other metallurgists. See, that was in the New York Times as the sulfidation of the steel came out. You know, World Trade Center 7, there's no airplane that hit it. And so how do you explain this? And then the towers too. And the New York Times said this is the greatest mystery uncovered so far. Words to that effect.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jones.